I still remember the smell of dust and burnt coffee in our office the day the accountant said the words out loud. We have 6 months, maybe less. 6 months before the company my grandfather built would collapse like a cheap suitcase on a broken wheel. At the time, Horizon Trails wasn't some $400 million travel giant. It was a joke in the industry. Outdated booking systems, manual confirmations, angry customers, empty cubicles where loyal employees once sat before being quietly laid off. And at the center of it all stood my father, proud, stubborn, and drowning in debt he refused to admit was pulling him under. I wasn't even officially part of the company then, just the tech-obsessed son who worked late nights in my childhood bedroom, coding between unpaid freelance gigs and instant noodles. Dad never asked for my help. In fact, he didn't believe in it. Travel is about relationships, he'd say, not algorithms. But I saw something he didn't. I saw how broken everything was. Flights overbooked, hotels double-sold, agents manually copying details from emails into spreadsheets like it was still 1998. So I built something quietly, a system that could predict availability, auto-adjust pricing, sync bookings in real time, and eliminate human error. I didn't call it a revolution, I just called it a fix. When I finally showed it to Dad, he barely looked at the screen. "Who asked you to do this?" he said. No praise, no curiosity, just suspicion. But desperation has a way of changing people. 2 months later, when our biggest client threatened to pull out, Dad called me into his office. His voice was tight, controlled, scared. "Can your software handle high volume?" That was the moment. Within 3 months, everything changed. Bookings doubled, then tripled. Complaints dropped by 80%. Travel agencies started lining up, asking how we suddenly became efficient. Revenue exploded so fast it felt unreal, like watching a dying patient stand up and run. By the end of the first year, we weren't surviving anymore. We were thriving. By year 3, Horizon Trails crossed $400 million in profit. People praised my father in interviews. Business magazines called him a visionary who embraced digital transformation. Awards arrived. Applause followed him everywhere. My name was never mentioned. At family dinners, Dad spoke about our success, while my mother smiled proudly, and my siblings avoided my eyes. I sat there listening, nodding, swallowing something bitter that never went away. Still, I told myself it was fine. He was my father. Blood mattered more than credit. Or so I believed. Until one morning, my access cards stopped working. Until my emails bounced back. Until the receptionist, someone I personally trained, said at me with pity and said, "Didn't anyone tell you?" Tell me what? That was the day my father called me into the same office where he once doubted me and said 6 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. "You're no longer needed here." But that wasn't even the worst part, because the reason he fired me would hurt more than the betrayal itself. I walked out that office numb, unaware that the real betrayal wasn't my father's decision, but the secret agreement he had already signed behind my back.
I didn't yell when Dad fired me. That surprises people when I tell them later. They expect shouting, broken chairs, maybe tears. But I just sat there, hands folded, staring at the framed photo behind his desk. Him, my mother, my siblings, and me. A picture taken years ago, before money rewrote our roles. "You're no longer needed here," he repeated, calmer this time, like he was explaining a budget cut. I waited for him to say, "Just kidding," or temporarily, or this is complicated. None of that came. Instead, he slid a thin folder across the desk. No emotion, no eye contact. HR will finalize the paperwork. Paperwork. As if I were some replaceable mid-level employee, not the son who built the backbone of his empire. Why? I finally asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. Dad exhaled slowly, the way he always did before delivering a lecture. You're becoming a problem. A problem? He said it so easily. You don't fit the direction the board wants to take, and frankly, this company needs stability, not ego. I almost laughed. Ego. The irony tasted metallic in my mouth. I wrote the system everything runs on, I said quietly. You can't even update a booking without... I know, that's exactly the issue. That's when I understood. This wasn't about performance, or money, or direction. This was about control. The board, he mentioned, wasn't some outsiders. It was family. My uncle, my older brother, a few investors Dad trusted more than his own son. Men who nodded at his ideas and never challenged him. Men who felt threatened by someone younger, smarter, necessary. They think you're indispensable, Dad said, and that makes people nervous. So instead of protecting me, you're firing me? I asked. He looked at me then, not with anger, not even guilt, with relief. You'll be compensated, generously. Sign the agreement, non-disclosure, non-compete. It's standard. I flipped through the pages. My name printed beneath clauses that stripped me of everything I built. No credit, no ownership, no future involvement, just money in exchange for silence. And one line that made my chest tighten. All intellectual property belongs solely to Horizon Trails. I built this before I was employed, before the company even stabilized. Dad leaned back in his chair. And now it belongs to the company, and the company belongs to the family. There it was. Family. Used like a weapon. When I stood up, he didn't stop me, didn't apologize, didn't say he was proud of me. He just pressed a button on his desk. Security walked me out. Past people I hired, past departments I designed, past screens displaying dashboards I coded line by line. No one spoke. Outside, the sunlight felt offensive, too bright for a day like that. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel, replaying his words over and over. You're becoming a problem. That night, I got a message from my brother. Don't take it personally. Dad did what was best for everyone. Everyone. Except me. But the final knife hadn't even been twisted yet, because 2 weeks later, I discovered what my father had done the night before he fired me. And it proved this wasn't fear. It was premeditated. I thought getting fired was the betrayal, until I saw the contract that transferred my life's work to someone else, signed while I still believed I had a place in that family.
I wasn't supposed to see the contract. If I hadn't forgotten my external hard drive at the office that last week, Back when I still believed I belonged there, I might have never known. But fate has a cruel sense of timing, and curiosity has a way of refusing to die. A former colleague called me late one night. His voice was shaky. "I shouldn't be telling you this," he said, "but you need to know." He emailed me a scanned document. No commentary, no explanation. Just a file. The header alone made my hands tremble. Strategic Technology Transfer Agreement. Dated 2 days before my termination. As I read, my chest tightened. The contract detailed the complete transfer of my travel software, my system, my architecture, my algorithms, to a newly formed subsidiary, not under my name, not even under Horizon Trails, under my brother's. A brand new tech arm, fully owned by him, licensed back to the parent company, meaning profits flowed through his entity while the risks stayed with the company. A legal masterpiece and a moral crime. My father's signature sat at the bottom of every page. I scrolled until I couldn't anymore, hoping, pathetically, that I'd find some clause proving I misunderstood. There wasn't one. They didn't just fire me. They planned my removal. They extracted the value first, then erased the source. When I confronted my brother, he didn't deny it. We met at a cafe we used to go to as kids. Same booth, same cracked table. Different people. "You should have seen this coming," he said, stirring his coffee like we were discussing weather. "Dad doesn't like sharing the wheel." "So you took it instead?" I asked. He shrugged. Someone had to protect the family assets. Family assets, not family members. "What about me?" I asked. "You'll be fine," he said. "You're smart. You'll build something else." Something else? As if years of sleepless nights, migraines, missed birthdays, and sacrificed relationships could be replicated like a template. I left without finishing my drink. That night, I went through old backups, code comments, version histories, timestamps proving the system existed before the company recovered, before I was on payroll, before the board even knew what an API was. Legally, I had a case. Emotionally, I was shattered. My mother called the next day. "Your father is under a lot of pressure," she said softly. "He didn't mean to hurt you." Didn't mean to? He signed his name on every page. She begged me not to cause trouble, not to tear the family apart, as if they hadn't already done that without my permission. Weeks passed. Horizon Trails announced record profits. Press releases praised my brother as the new tech visionary. His face replaced mine in meetings I once led. I stopped sleeping, not because of anger, but because something inside me had gone cold. I realized something terrifying in that silence. They believed I was done. They thought firing me removed the risk. They forgot one thing. I didn't just build the system, I knew where it broke. And for the first time since I walked out of that office, I stopped feeling like a victim. I started feeling like a threat. They stole my work and my identity, but they never asked themselves one dangerous question. What happens when the son they erased decides to fight back? I didn't call a lawyer right away. That's what everyone expected me to do. Storm into a courtroom, file lawsuits, drag the family name through headlines. But rage makes people sloppy, and I had learned something crucial from my father over the years. Never reveal your next move. So instead, I disappeared. No LinkedIn updates, no angry posts, no industry gossip. I let them believe the story they'd written for me, that I was broken, bitter, and irrelevant. Inside, I was building something else. Not a clone of my old system, not a revenge app. Something smarter, leaner, decentralized. A platform that didn't just manage bookings, but predicted human travel behavior before it happened. I worked from a rented apartment with cracked walls and unreliable Wi-Fi. 12-hour days, black coffee, music loud enough to drown out memories. And while I coded, I listened. Former colleagues reached out quietly, not to help, but to warn me. "Your brother doesn't understand the system," one said. "They've locked themselves into your old architecture," another whispered. "Your father thinks everything is stable," someone else told me. It's not. They were sitting on a time bomb. The original system had fail-safes only I understood, scaling limits designed for gradual growth, not the explosive expansion they were pushing now. Under extreme demand, the cracks would show. I had warned them once. They didn't listen, because listening to me would have meant admitting I mattered. 3 months later, I got the call. Dad. I almost didn't answer. His voice sounded older, thinner. "We're having some issues," he said. "Bookings are failing in certain regions." I let the silence stretch. "You'll need to speak to my brother," I finally replied. "He doesn't have your knowledge," Dad said. You assumed I was replaceable," I cut in. He didn't argue. "Come back," he said. "We can talk." Talk. That word used to mean something. "I can't," I said. "You made sure of that." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. The company stumbled, then leaked, then bled. Clients complained, delays piled up. A system once praised as flawless started cracking in public. Stock confidence dipped, and that's when the board panicked. A formal email arrived, polished and cold. Request for consultation services. They didn't say sorry, they said compensation. I ignored it. Another email followed, then another. Finally, my mother showed up at my door. She looked at me the way she did when I was a child, like she hoped I'd fix something she couldn't. "Your father's health isn't good," she said. "This stress." "You didn't stop him," I replied. She cried, and for a moment I almost broke. But then I remembered the contract, the signatures, the silence. I wasn't punishing them. I was protecting myself. Still, the hardest decision of my life was coming, because fixing the system would save the company, but refusing might destroy the man who raised me. When my father finally begged me to return, I realized the real question wasn't whether I could save the company, but whether I wanted to save the family that betrayed me. I agreed to meet them. Not at the office, not at the house I grew up in. Neutral ground. A law firm downtown with glass walls and quiet power. I arrived alone. They didn't. My father sat at the center of the table, shoulders slumped, suit hanging looser than I remembered. My brother was to his right, confident as ever, tapping his pen like this was just another negotiation. 2 board members sat across from me, avoiding my eyes. No hugs, no apologies, just documents. "We need your expertise," one of the board members began, urgently. I nodded. "Then we should talk about terms." My brother smirked. "You're not in a position to make demands." I slid a folder across the table. The room went quiet. Inside were technical reports, independent audits, forecasts showing how the system would collapse under projected growth within 6 months, charts they couldn't argue with. "I'm the only one who can stabilize it," I said calmly, "and if I don't, your $400 million profit becomes a liability." Dad looked at the papers like they were written in another language. "What do you want?" he asked. I met his eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't see authority there. I saw fear. "I want my intellectual property acknowledged, publicly." My brother laughed. "That's not happening." I continued. "I want equity in the tech subsidiary, majority control." The laughter stopped. "And," I added, "I want a written apology entered into company record for wrongful termination." Dad stiffened. "That's humiliation." "No, that's accountability." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. My brother accused me of revenge. The board whispered about optics. Dad stayed silent, staring at the table like it might crack open. Finally, he spoke. "You're asking me to admit I was wrong." "Yes." He leaned back, exhausted. "You're my son. You fired me like a stranger." That was the moment everything shifted. The board excused themselves. My brother stormed out, muttering something about betrayal. And suddenly it was just me and my father. "I built this company for you, for all of you," he said quietly. "And I saved it, but you couldn't stand that." He didn't deny it. "I was afraid you'd outgrow me." That confession landed heavier than any apology. We signed nothing that day, but 3 days later the offer came back, revised. They accepted most of my terms. Most. I returned as a consultant, official credit restored, partial control of the tech arm. The apology, however, was missing. When I asked about it, Dad's response was short. "I can't do that." And in that moment, I understood something painful. He would risk the company before he risked his pride. So I did something no one expected. I walked away. Again. They thought I needed them more than they needed me, but my final decision would force my father to choose between his legacy and his ego. I didn't walk back into Horizon Trails immediately. Instead, I built quietly, anonymously, in a small office 2 blocks away from the company headquarters. I had learned enough to know exactly where the system would fail first, and I also knew how to capitalize on it. The first signs appeared within weeks. Overbooked flights, double-charged customers, automated emails that contradicted themselves. A glitch in their payment system froze bookings for an entire weekend. Social media exploded. Journalists called. Travel bloggers mocked. And through it all, my father and brother flailed. Every call they made, every meeting they had, only confirmed what I already knew. They didn't understand the beast they tried to tame. I didn't interfere directly. I watched. I collected evidence, screenshots, logs, internal memos, everything. Not to ruin them, at least not yet. Then the opportunity came. A major investor demanded a full audit. They wanted proof of mismanagement. Suddenly, every board member who had nodded at my firing now whispered my name in meetings. I sent an email to their auditors, carefully worded, professional, concise. evidence attached. My work on the system, its original design, and the critical mistakes they'd made while trying to run it without me. The response was swift. They called an emergency board meeting. My father sat at the head of the table. My brother fidgeted nervously. And there, in front of the entire board, the auditors confirmed it. Significant operational risk exists because the original architect is not involved, they said. Immediate corrective measures recommended. The room went silent. Eyes on Dad. Eyes on me. They hadn't seen this coming. I entered the conference room calmly, letting my presence speak louder than any words. "Hello, everyone," I said. "I assume you've been briefed." Dad didn't answer. My brother's face drained of color. "You all underestimated me, and you assumed that because I was your son, I would bend to your rules, to your pride. I'm here to fix this, but only under conditions that acknowledge my work and ensure it can't be stolen again." They nodded, grudgingly. They had no choice. By the end of the day, I had regained control of the tech arm, official recognition of my system, full rights to its ongoing development, and a board-mandated clause preventing my removal without cause. But more importantly, I had something they could never take back: power. That night I stood on the rooftop of the office building, looking at the city lights, the same ones I'd stared at as a kid dreaming about making a difference. And I realized something terrifying. I had won. But victory tasted bitter, because in winning I had destroyed the illusion of family loyalty. I hadn't just outsmarted them, I'd exposed the truth, that blood ties don't protect you from betrayal, and love doesn't guarantee respect. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the hardest part was still to come. Because winning back my work wasn't enough. I had to decide what to do with my father, with my brother, with the people who had called themselves family and had almost killed me. I had the power to take everything back, but the question was, could I forgive them, or would revenge finally taste sweeter than reconciliation? The board meeting after that was unlike any we'd ever had. I walked in not as the fired son, not as the silent genius in the shadows, but as the person holding the fate of Horizon Trails in my hands. Every eye was on me, every whisper quieted, every phone forgotten. Dad sat at the head of the table, the same chair I had once occupied as a junior observer. His hands trembled slightly, not with fear of me, but with fear of himself. My brother, who had flaunted confidence for years, looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. I had prepared for this moment. I had charts, audit reports, strategic plans, evidence of how the company had faltered under my absence. And I had something else, a choice. "Here's the situation," I began. "The system I built is the only thing keeping this company solvent. You've seen the data. The auditors have confirmed it. We can either fix this together or watch it collapse entirely." The room was silent. Even my father, usually quick to interrupt, stayed quiet. "And here's the part that matters," I continued. "I can fix it. I will. But I will not pretend that what happened before doesn't matter. I will not forgive mistakes without accountability. And I will not work in a place where betrayal is tolerated." Dad swallowed hard. What are you asking?" recognition, credit, my stake in the tech subsidiary, a guarantee that I cannot be removed without cause, and a formal acknowledgement of the wrongful termination. He nodded slowly. All reasonable. I paused, looking at him, at the man who had fired me, erased me, and yet raised me. And one more thing. I need to know that you understand why you lost my trust, because without that, nothing I do will matter, not for the company, not for us. My brother shifted uncomfortably. Trust doesn't fix profits. No, I said, but it fixes legacy, and if you can't see that, then profits alone mean nothing. Weeks later, agreements were signed. Public credit was restored. My name appeared in articles, press releases, and interviews. The system bore my mark. But something else changed too. My father began to treat me differently, not with fear, not with resentment, but with respect. It was fragile, tentative, and it wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was the start. Family dinners became quieter, more cautious, but I noticed small things. My father asking for my opinion, my mother sharing old stories about me, my brother occasionally admitting a technical point I alone could solve. These gestures were tiny, but they meant something. I realized then that winning wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, about making sure the people who claimed to love you can't destroy you without consequences. And sometimes saving a company or a family means walking a delicate line between anger and mercy. I stayed with Horizon Trails. I didn't take over. I didn't overthrow. I rebuilt what they had tried to take from me, not for them, but for me, for the vision I had always believed in. And in the end, I understood the most painful truth. Families can betray, but families can also learn, slowly, sometimes painfully, and sometimes, just sometimes, the son who was cast aside can return stronger than ever, not just to claim his place, but to redefine what it means to be family. Because blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, but it doesn't erase resilience either.